Terem. Terem.
Hi folks, Scott from Terem here. Today we're going to look at getting started with product analytics. So if you're just getting started, there can be so many different data points that you're trying to think about. Page views, active users, revenue. You've probably got requests coming in from different stakeholders around what they want you to measure, and it can all be a bit too much if you're just getting started. So the first thing I just want to talk about is leading indicators and lagging indicators. So lagging indicators, kind of vanity metrics like revenue, active users, are important, but they're a lagging indicator of how successful you're being with your product and your product decisions. So what we want to look for are leading indicators, data points that you can make decisions around and help you make better decisions for your product. To help you work out where to get started with your product analytics, I'm going to cover 3 different areas. So the first one is where teams new to product analytics get stuck, how to work out what to measure, and the 3 metrics to start with. There's a bit of an assumption here that you already have a product up and running as well, but let's just put that to one side for a moment. So where do new teams get stuck? Well, it's really 2 places. Number 1, they either measure only lagging indicators, revenue, active users, number of page views, something like that, or they try to measure everything and become overwhelmed. Let's kind of see where each direction takes us and why those are problems. Number 1, if we only look at lagging indicators. Alright, if you're only measuring lagging indicators, you're probably headed for trouble, you just don't realize it yet. Lagging indicators are usually the result of actions and behavior that's already occurred. So revenue, for instance, is usually the result of a customer successfully interacting with your trial maybe, or your product, liking that product and choosing to renew with it. That is, revenue or active users, for example, is increasing or decreasing as a result of other things that we could be measuring beforehand that are the leading indicators of whether one of these metrics moves. So we want to move further along and find the things that are driving those metrics. You can start to see some problems emerging here. First of all, you're not going to know about a problem until a bit later on because you're further down the action curve. So for instance, if people stop using the product or have an outage or have problems with a feature or the product itself, then early in the month, if you're tracking that, you would see the renewal. But if you're not and all you're tracking is the revenue, you're not going to find out about that person being annoyed or frustrated or having problems until after they don't renew, which is almost 30 days too late, a couple of weeks too late. Small side, I'm kind of saying don't worry about revenue, don't worry about active users, but don't completely disregard it as well. You know, ultimately, if people aren't paying or you're not getting the users you need, then what you're doing with your product may not matter. So it is in many ways a defining metric, and you kind of got to deal with that paradox when you're doing your analytics here. But again, find leading indicators. Let's look at why trying to measure everything fails. So there's a bit of a common theme that I see when it comes to trying to measure everything. Lots of enthusiasm, lots of let's understand our customer from every viewpoint, understand what's going on. Big important projects are launched to do customer analytics. We're going to try and measure every single angle, viewpoint. We're evaluating lots of tools. Months go by, meetings go by where we're trying to work out, what are all the things we need to measure, how much budget do we need, all that kind of stuff. Tools are implemented, connected to things. This is often a bit of the theme and what goes on here, and it's admirable trying to understand the customer, but often what happens is these things kind of take too long to play out, and so we don't get the data that we need as a product team to make decisions. And B, if they do happen and we get the data, there's almost data overwhelm. There's too many information points, too much to sort through, too much going on. And when you've got that much complexity, it's also sometimes quite complex interpreting the data and what's happening. So how do you work out what to measure? Well, there's a few kind of simple tactics that would be great if you take them, agree with your team, agree with your stakeholders, tactics and principles that you can use to try and work through this process and get measuring, get acting on data sooner. These tactics are, number 1, follow product-led principles. So take an outside-in perspective, look at it from your customer's point of view, release early and often, start measuring something and then mature it through iteration, find ways to add more data to your analytics. Don't get stressed that you don't have all the information points, and prioritize ruthlessly. So work out which metrics are more important than others, and definitely some metrics are more important than others. Next tactic is focus on 3 areas first, which are measuring your customer's job to be done, measuring activation, and measuring performance of your software or your product. The next one is to get familiar with the Pirate metrics framework so that you can orient yourself and work out where to iterate to next. All right, let's dig into the 3 metrics to start with in a bit more detail. So the first metric, measuring your customer's job to be done, is probably the most essential one. So if you aren't familiar with jobs to be done, it's really about understanding what a customer is hiring, what job a customer is hiring your product to do for them, and the benefit, value, and problem that solves for them. So what you want to try and be doing is measuring how well you're solving the problem for your customer. So you've got to understand what the problem is that you solve, and you want to be measuring the behavior associated with that. The next measure you want to look at is activation. So activation can be for a new product or a new feature, and activation is looking at how your customer's going with using your new product or feature. Conversion rates are good here. Funnels are a really good way to measure here. How are people progressing through the different steps to go from having not used the new product or the new feature to having now using it. Activation, when done well, really ends up as a bit of a funnel, and you can watch the steps through. The third measure that we want is performance. And performance is around uptime, response time, how often it works, the product works or doesn't work. These ones are super critical because you want to be able to see, are we just fulfilling? So measure number 3, performance. You want to pick something around response time, uptime, availability. Work out how fast your pages are responding, maybe how fast downloads are happening, or data's being sent, emails are being sent, messages are being sent, whatever's relevant to the performance of your product. Make sure you've got a good, strong sense of performance. Again, you don't need to measure everything at the start. Just pick these 3 things to focus on and then iterate out from here. If you have any metrics that you love or love to start with, please put them in the comments for others to see. Otherwise, if you love this video, want to see more, subscribe to the channel, check out our other videos. Look forward to speaking with you again. Thank you for having me.